ahead. Somebody said there's a storm up ahead. Come on, say there's a storm up ahead. And so as Paul began to share with the centurion, or the head soldier, the centurion began to recognize that this man, he's just not a mere man. Maybe he really does have a relationship with God. And so the centurion, he kept that in his mind. And so as they went on this voyage, as they began to go across the water, then there became some turbulence in the water. The storm began to brew in the water. And so again, as the storm began to brew, Paul and the other prisoners were there, and the boat began to get very rocky, and the waters began to rage, and so they began to actually throw over the soldiers into the water and say that they could just die there because it's too much weight on this ship. If we could just alleviate some of the weight, then the turbulence won't be so bad. But the centurion, he would not allow Paul to be thrown over. You've got to recognize that no matter what Satan's plan is for your life, God will send somebody, whether it's your mother, your father, some mother in the church, or someone in the grocery store. God will send somebody to pray for you that will interrupt Satan's plan. And so as they continued on in this ship, and as the ship came into contact with the storm, remember, they'd already thrown over the other soldiers to die, but they allowed Paul to stay there on that ship and make it to land. Well, in the progress to land, then the ship had a wreck. The ship began to fall apart. And the first verse that I read said they came in on broken pieces. How many people do you know have been through the same thing that you've been through, but you made it and they didn't? How many friends do you have? How many colleagues growing up in the neighborhood did you know that they died because they were at the get-together at the park, or they died doing something, or they ended up in jail, or ended up in situations where they lost their mind, or they lost their hope? But God allowed you to come through. And yes, your life may not be where you want it to be, but somebody say, I appreciate broken pieces. Yes, and so as they came into on broken pieces, they came to a place called Melita. And this land of Melita, it was a place where the barbarians lived, where the people were very aggressive, they were very mean, they were very rude, they were not welcoming people. But because of the favor upon Paul's life, they began to welcome him and begin to go to the water side and say, what can we do to help you? Now again, no matter what situation you're in, God, when God's hand is upon your life, God will allow there to be people in your life that will give you favor. Somebody say favor. You've got to understand that we cannot any longer continue to take advantage of God's favor, because just as God, as we're in a season where God is pulling the covers and he's exposing things, we have to recognize that the favor of God is something that not everybody has. But Paul had this same favor upon his life, and these people who normally would have been mean and would have been very aggressive and would have run him away, they began to welcome him and say, come on over here. What happened? We'll take care of you. And so as they were there, Paul was cold because he had been in the storm. And you can imagine having gone through a storm where a shipwreck, you're all dirty and you're wet. And then it was even raining. And so I'm sure he was shivering. I'm sure he was cold. I'm sure his emotions were a bit jarred. And then he was in a foreign place. How many times do you feel like, God, you brought me out of this, but now you put me in a place that's uncomfortable because I don't know this place. I'm not familiar with this. Many times, even in this day and in this hour, God, as the children of God, he is bringing us to a place that's not the norm, that's not common, that's not comfortable. And although we want to be delivered out of these places, when we get to the new place, it begins to bring fear to us because we've never been here before. But Paul began to stand there and allow those people to welcome him. And they said, you know what, let's make a fire. Somebody say fire. You've got to understand that in every area of your life, no matter what you're doing, whether it's your career, whether it's your education, whether it's your personal life, whether it's relationships, you have got to have the presence of God there with you. Without the presence of God, you will be walking blindly. You'll be walking without provision. You'll be walking, just going about. But when the presence of the Lord is in your life, there is nothing that can happen to you that God has not allowed. And if God has allowed it, he's allowed a way out. And so Paul, as they begin to make the fire, and hear the Spirit of the Lord begin to say to me, Natasha, I'm trying to stir a fire. I'm trying to spark a fire in my people, not just the people at University Christian Fellowship, not just the people in Orlando, but my people all over this world. I'm trying to spark a fire, but we have got to be willing to be on the uncomfortable and the unfamiliar place to experience the fire. Somebody say the fire. What am I saying? You've got to be willing to go beyond where you've gone before. You can't just stand there at the bank of the river, at the bank of the ocean that you just came out of that storm and get comfortable there. You've got to be willing to go into the place that's uncommon, that's uncomfortable, that you've never been before. Because in order for you to experience God in all that He is, He's got to know that you trust Him. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not familiar, even if it's not with mom and them, even if it's not with my homegirls or my homeboys. God, I want you so bad that I'll allow you to lead me into a new place. Somebody say a new place. And so as they begin to make this fire, Paul didn't just stand there like a victim of a shipwreck. Somebody say a victim. God has not called us to be a victim. He has called us to be a victor. I'm sure everyone in this room has a story where it'll be a tearjerker. It'll make us cry because of some unfortunate experience that you've been through. Well, guess what? You're not the only one that's been through some unfortunate experience. And because you declare that God is God, He's the Lord of your life, you come here every Sunday at 4 o'clock and you worship back home and you say your prayer to God on a daily basis, you have a right to be a victor. God has not called us to be a victim and just to sit there and say, woe is me, and my mama did this, and my boyfriend did that, and my life is just all jacked up. But because we have God in our life, we cannot just stay there in that place, but we can become a participator. Even as they were making a fire, a place of warmth for Paul, he began to help them pick up the sticks and gather the sticks. What am I saying? If we allow the enemy to make us just stand right there shivering and cold, we're not moving. And we serve a God that's a God of advancement, that's a God of progression. Jesus never stayed in one place. He was always moving. And many times as the children of God and those of us that love God, we become religious with our relationship with God instead of seeking God and getting to know Him, but we do it just because that's what's always been done. Well, honey, God is not a God that does things just because it's always been done, but He's always trying to bring us into a new revelation of who He is. Somebody say fire. And so as Paul was gathering the sticks, as he was still working, even though he was in an uncomfortable position, he was still cold and he was still wet, but he was still working. And even as they began to draw the fire began to grow, and I'm just about done. The fire began to grow, and the fire began to grow, and he began to gather sticks. And just as he went down to gather the stick and put the stick on top of the fire, there came a revived serpent or a snake. And the Bible says that this serpent fastened himself onto Paul's arm. Now, to fasten doesn't just mean it slithered on his arm, but that thing had a grip on him. And many of us sitting in this room, there are issues and things as we're pressing into God, and God deliver me, and God make me free. There is something that is holding on to you, and it seems like you can't get rid of it. I'm going to talk about me. There was a time in my life where I wanted so badly to be free and to be what God had called me to be. But because I had learned to run games so well, and because I had learned to be in and out of the church at the same time, and I could preach the house down, but I could make one phone call and have somebody else's husband paying my bills, that thing had become a part of me, and in my own power, I couldn't get rid of it. But when I began to say, God, I need your help, and it is only in you that I can be free, that's when I was free. And so I didn't come to talk to anybody that's wanting to dibble-dabble or pity-pat with God, but I'm talking about those of you that really want the deliverance of God in your life. You really want to be all that God has called you to be, but you understand that in your own power, in your own good deeds, and in your own good works, it can happen. Somebody say fire. You got to get this, as he was trying to increase the fire of God and grow the fire of God in his life. Here comes this serpent that seemed to be dead because it was so still and it was so quiet. One bite from a snake can kill you. And what we have to understand, we can't just press those things down in our life and come to church and clap our hands and sing on the praise and worship team and be on the DOC and be on the dance team and help with the multimedia and come to church every week and pay our tithe and offering and keep that thing suppressed and think that it's going to go away. You've got to understand that if you really want to be able to flow in God and to have a continual flow in God, that you've got to acknowledge those things and say, God, I need your help.